Okay.
All right. Bye, Joe. Good luck.
Thanks, man. Everybody there. Hello. Hey, how's it going, gang? Seth Miranda, aka Last Witness, just abandoned me in the lifeboat of a YouTube presentation. He coached me into this. He got me going, and so I just killed the video stream, so it doesn't compete with the audio here, and I've got the live chat going. And yes, I agree with Ann Cahill. Seth is a tech wizard. So you're seeing me here at home, along with everybody in the world, kind of, sort of at home. All of us have hit the pause button in a big way. And that's not completely unfamiliar, though this is incredibly damaging and unique, and no one could have predicted this, I don't think. And, here we are. We are struggling through this pandemic. The admirable aspects of the human spirit that are coming forward are tremendous. I highly recommend looking at John Krasinski's Some Good News if you want just a refresher on the human spirit. But here we are. I'm at home, our home studio. This is our workroom behind us. And the premise of tonight with my buds at Adorama, we're going live now for Adorama Camera in New York, Seth Miranda, my bud Daniel Norton, my bud Ephraim Nussbaum, all those guys, wonderful folks who work at that store, knowledgeable people. I've had a long relationship with them, and they're nothing short of terrific. And I'm actually on this chat because of my relationship with Seth. And Seth just told me something interesting. He said, look, man, if it hadn't been for your books and the way you have mentored for all these years, I might not even be a photographer. So he's talking me through this. And I guess at some point earlier in his career, I talked him through a few things, even though I didn't know it. So somebody just said, Michael just said, hey, Joe, having trouble hearing you. Is that better? Is that better? Michael, chime back in if you can. Can barely hear. Okay. I'm going to project my voice. I've got the microphone right next to me. Seth, why don't you, Seth, can you send me a text? You say my mic is low and only one channel. Should I go back to maybe using the display audio, perhaps? I know it's a little boomy, but let me know. Let me know. And somebody just wrote in that his wife hates Adorama because of the high credit card payments. Someone's just saying, not really. Yes, this is better. Seth says that is better sound. All right. Okay, so I'm going to even put it up here. You're going to see a little bit of the boom section of this maybe coming up. Just adjusting here, folks, to the new world of conferencing and talking about photography instead of actually doing it. So anyway, loud and clear. Someone says loud and clear. Someone says much better. All right, just get closer to the mic. Thank you, Marco. All right, all right, here we go. And Alp, hello, Alp. How's it going down there in Georgia? I hope you are okay. And especially that incredibly beautiful young bouncing child that you have that I see so many wonderful pictures of. Anyway, so I'm looking at the chat, and I'll try to stay away from it for just a minute because everybody's offering greetings and all sorts of things, which is wonderful on their part, to be sure. And the premise of this is to kind of go through or talk a little bit about sort of what we're all going through a little bit, and I'm going to put this up in here. Maybe that will do a little bit better. Minimize that. And tell you what, give me just a little cosmetic second here, folks. God, with this microphone here, I feel like a late night DJ in New York City, It's 4 a.m. in New York City. I have some deep cuts from early recording from before the Grateful Dead was the actual Grateful Dead. Anyway, moving along. Here we go. It's been a long, strange trip, to be sure. Okay. All right. I'm getting a lot of pinging here on the chat room about no right channel in the audio. And if you have to switch to the desktop mic. All right. So, Seth, give me just a second here, and I'll see what I can do. Folks, give me 2 minutes to make a little bit of a technical adjustment here, and we will get going. Hopefully, I can be the master of this particular instance here. Okay. So I'm saying Onyx. And I'll go to device here, and I'll say audio, and hit OK. All right, so you folks tell me, is that better? Seth, can you check in with me? Can anybody hear me okay? Tom, thank you. Doing great for a photog. Yeah. Great. Much better. All right. People are saying much better. That's reassuring. Ah, that did it. Way to go, Michael. All right. All right. Okay. All right. So, Mom, okay. Okay. That's loud, Seth is saying. Boom. All right. Good. Much better. All right. Here we go. So let's get past the... let's get past the notion of the audio here, and I know I'm kind of redlining a little bit on some of the audio, but I think I'll just boom my voice back down a touch, you know. And Seth is saying fix my screen. All right. So give me just a second on that, because when I was messing around before, I messed up the screen. So, all right, here we go. I think this is better. Okay. All right. All right. So, anyway, a long, strange trip. That has been the case for me photographically, as I'm sure it is for lots of folks. You know, if you've been doing this business for a while, or be involved in actually trying to be gainfully employed as a photographer, camera in hand, kind of no safety net, not a weekend adventure perhaps, or something that you kind of put your shoulder to the wheel a long time ago and were determined to push that wheel for as long and as far and as hard as you could. And yeah, that's a different equation a little bit. I bless the fact of photography now being as popular as it is. I bless the fact of everybody out there shooting pictures and sharing life stories, and all the I've got a whole folder on my desktop right now called Quarantine Humor, where people have been sending me funny pictures, the videos, you name it, most of which can't be shown in the sense of humor. Displayed is probably best kept off the screen, but you know, people are participating in the world in a way that was nothing I certainly ever dreamed about when I first took a camera in hand with black and white triax in the back of a knicker mat and a 50mm lens, and wrapped up my stuff and headed for New York City out of Syracuse University many years ago. Yeah, hit New York in 1976. So that's obviously a long time ago. Historical kinds of New York now. People look at the city now and see pictures of it back in that day, and it's almost unrecognizable. But I knew that I wanted to come to New York, and I knew I wanted to try to make it as a photographer, which was sort of, you know, massively stupid on my part to think that a green young kid who barely knew anything photographically could come to New York and make a living. New York is a hotbed of professional photographers. I came down here, and you know, some of the best photographers in the world were here. What was I thinking? You know, so the premise of this chat, or the time we're going to spend together, is to kind of share the ups and downs of photography. And let me tell you this, folks, I'm an open book about this stuff. People who, have questions about how all this goes, feel free. I'm very open about the struggles of it. I have always tried to avoid the notion that, there might be some folks who subscribe to the fact that, great art occurs every time you pick up a camera, and this is one of these effortless things where you wait for golden light and, the visual angels sit on your shoulders. And this is hard work. This is very, very hard work, and I've been doing it now lovingly, actually. As hard as it is, I still love it. I always tell young photographers this. I'm still in love with the sound of the shutter, even though the sound of the shutter has changed over the course of time. Here's the thing, gang, and I've said this before, so forgive me for saying it again. Being a photographer is not something you do. Being a photographer is something you are. And once it's kind of, curled around your being, your psyche, your emotions, your heart, your head, whatever you might want to refer to, then you're kind of stuck. It's something that you, that is kind of almost at that point required of you to do, because it'll never leave you. It'll never leave you. I can't tell you how many folks I've had in workshops who might have had a successful career. They might be a little bit older, and they've had a successful career doing something. As they oftentimes say, life got in the way, and they went off and ventured into computers or technology or the law or some other kind of profession. And now they've been there and done that, and they are ready to return, as they oftentimes say, to their first love, okay, which is photography. I'm going to push the camera here just a tiny bit. So photography for me became a love almost immediately when I took camera in hand. And that was, quite a long time ago now. And as I say, propelled by that kind of intention and desire to be good at this, I came to New York City to see if I could test myself. And that's pretty much still ongoing. I'm still testing myself. That's the thing. And that some folks may regard this as, daunting news indeed. That at this point, I still struggle with this, and occasionally I get a comment like, well, dude, you've been doing this for so long. How is it potentially even still a struggle for you? And the situation is, for me, it's never a done deal. Photography is, it's advanced, trigonometry or whatever you want to call it. Put a name for a hard class in school, and that is photography. It's not easy. Anytime you get super confident in this business and say to yourself, got it knocked, it'll just teach you otherwise. It'll reach right up, slap you upside the head and say, The beautiful thing about this is that the repetitive failure becomes like a patina, or maybe the rings on a tree, and you learn and grow from it. And the other thing is, that is fuel for the fire, is that you'll never ever shoot your best picture. I firmly believe that. You'll never shoot your best picture. That's always going to be out there. If you're still got a beating heart about this, and you're still going to pursue it with a passion and a desire and a serious intent that you just grapple with almost every day, you'll never shoot your best picture. Still out there someplace. You might have shot some good ones, maybe even some noteworthy ones, maybe even a few pictures here and there that people might remember. But the fuel for the fire is that one, the holy grail that you might have been pursuing for a long time. That's kind of still out there, shrouded in the fog of the future, and it's the joy of it is going after it and trying to find it. So here we got a few kind of chat things going on. You can always better your best. You're right. Good to see you, Joe. Neil, how's it going? Everybody is doing okay. Both channels working. All right, so I'm glad we cleared that audio hurdle. So I put together, Brad is saying mention evolution from film to digital, you know, and I'm going to do that. I'm definitely going to do that. So maybe it's time here to for me to take another leap of technology. I'm going to go to my OBS. I'm going to hit my webinar, and what you should see now, and Seth, maybe you can confirm this, is a grid. I've got Capture One up and running, and a grid. And so I spent some time in anticipation of this, kind of going through, and particularly because Adorama is a New York store. It's like Adorama is quintessential New York, you know? I mean, if you're going to hire somebody like Seth, you know, you got to be a New York store, because Seth is a New York guy. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, you know, I'm going to, Seth, just get used to it, because I'm going to bounce some stuff off of you and bounce the ball your direction here and there, you know, periodically during the course of all this. But here's the thing. I came to New York in 76. I took a job as a copy boy at the New York Daily News. Now, that was a painful experience, but also a wonderful experience. I got my foot in the door of New York City journalism, and in particular, photojournalism, photography, street photography, tabloid photography, and the New York Daily News used to have that stylized little logo up at the top of it. It was New York's picture newspaper, and it was a stylized image of a speed graphic, which is where the paper had come from back in the days of the gentlemen out there, you know, in raincoats and a fedora with the press tag in the band of their fedora, and they would have a speed graphic with a flash bulb on it, you know. And some of those guys, you know, as savvy as they were, as streetwise as they weren't. I wouldn't put their ambitions in the category of great art. Okay, some of them I even had like the focus ring on their speed graphic hammered out at like 10 feet, and they knew the flash exposure at 10 feet, and they just shot at 10 feet. And if the crucial moment happened at 10 feet, they got lucky that day. If it didn't, you know, what are you going to do? You know, this was back in the day too, when, you know, there were so many newspapers in New York, and there was a lot of intense competition, but also cooperation, right? It wasn't uncommon at a press conference, and this is real old school stuff I'm harking back to, if a bunch of photographers were at a crucial press conference and somebody got stuck in a bad position, they would literally shout to a colleague across the room, take a 4x5 holder and shout to him like, "I'm stuck, man," and throw the holder across the press conference to his colleague and just shout to him, "Make a holder for me." And that was the kind of level of camaraderie, and, you know, you'd beat each other's brains out, and then you'd all end up at the same bar. So this was kind of the tradition that I walked into at the Daily News. So anyway, so back to that time and that day, I'll show you. This is the very first picture story I ever shot when I came to New York City. And I'm here I have to get used to the fact that the OBS is displaying my grid, but I have to go over to my Capture One screen to make that hot and double click on that so that it comes up. So bear with me, folks. Lots of buttons and dials here, and we're working our way through it. Hope everybody's doing well. There was somebody here, God, from Germany. Peter, how's it going, man? Somebody's from South Africa. Andrew, how you doing, man? Atlanta, Georgia, all this. All right. So this picture, and I'm not going to dwell on any one picture. And please, gang, via the chat room, you know, pump some stuff at me. Like if you want me to dwell on something, if you want me to like divert, if you want me to go back to a picture, send me a note. I'll do it. Okay. The first real question, or the kind of, you know, "Hey Joe, can you talk about this?" Came a little bit earlier and said, you know, talk about your transition from digital or from film to digital. So, Okay, but this is back deep in the film days. All right, this photo essay I did, Ringling Brothers, a small clown there, Prince Paul. Okay, he's long since passed away, but he was a classic Ringling Brothers clown. Boston accent, straight from Boston. We got along well. We were kind of the odd couple around New York City together. And I'll be honest with you, I got this story because I faked it, with Ringling Brothers. I had always been, I've always loved the performing arts. And when Ringling Brothers used to come to town in Madison Square Garden, they would camp out for literally 4 or 5 weeks. And so I went to Ringling Brothers and said, I'm with the New York Daily News, which was true. I wasn't a photographer, I was just a copy boy, but they were very impressed. And they introduced me to the Prince, and they let me just spend time with him, and I worked on this story because that was the traditions that I had observed in school, the legendary photo essays of W. Eugene Smith, Burke White, the Paul Fusco over at Magnum. Time spent equals good pictures. So I spent a long time with the Prince because nobody expected anything from me. I wasn't on assignment. Daily News didn't even really know I was doing it. So the thing about this was I was able just to be out in the woods with no pressure and just make pictures as I saw fit. No art direction. Go back over here. And this was maybe my first successful flash picture. I'll call it a successful flash picture. Some of you looking at this might debate me, okay? This is the Prince getting made up. Now, I had taken a class with John Loengard, who was the director of photography of Life magazine, and I showed this to him, and I could tell there was something, like this is an awkward picture, right? There's no background to it. His eyes are closed. There's nothing really classically composed about it. There's not even all that much information. But John looked at this picture and he said, this is strong. This is where you need to be, because I can see in his face, I can see pain. I can see pain. And that was an interesting revelation to me because I had not seen that at that point. I was like, all right. So John made an emotional connection with this picture. And then, of course, moving in close, I learned very early on the imperative, I guess you would say, the imperative of working entire to detail. Working big and then coming in closer. Peeling the onion is a lesson that a photo editor, that was how he verbalized it to me, to get closer and closer and closer to your subject. So this was really my first effort in the realm of trying to get published in New York City. And the Daily News did it right. I mean, they took this and they ran it on what they called the double truck, which was the center spread in the New York Daily News. And I was kind of like, this is it. I just got it in print. I did a photo story and I got it in print. So there's a beginning. There's a beginning back in the very dark days. I was taking home $109 a week. And even in 1976, that wasn't a lot. I was living in a flophouse hotel on the Upper West Side of New York. So you talk about dips in your career. This was a very deep valley that I was in, and my career hadn't even started yet. So, I had no idea. I had no idea I would ever see the top. There were nights, I'll just admit this, there were nights I went back to this dumb little apartment, steaming hot in the summer, no air conditioning, no fans, no nothing. And I would just sit down on my bed and I would start crying. Because I couldn't connect. I couldn't be patient with the idea. I kept thinking to myself, why won't anybody see that I can do this? Why doesn't anybody grasp the fact that I have to do this? And they don't, they don't care. They're in the business of putting out a newspaper, doing what they do, and the kid, get me a light and sweet, and they give you a nickel tip. So anyway, the very humble beginnings. So, this is kind of like an up and down account of a career. And certainly this was one of the down aspects of a career. I can look at it that way, but I also didn't even know at that point that I was building something. So let me look at the, let me look here, bring my cursor over, and so, Stephanie Bradshaw, how's it going from London? Okay, Michael, hey Joe, sometimes I feel like becoming a master of light and composition is like an ongoing search for the Holy Grail. Yeah, you're never a master of light and composition. You just aren't, you know. It is an ever fluid situation. Photography is a situational art and craft. There are days and situations that you'll get yourself into where a good picture is simply not to be had. Let's face it, we've all blown assignments. Some folks are less than ready to admit that. I know some of those folks, and I am always ready to admit it because, flaws are part of our makeup. I think actually failing on a fairly repetitive basis makes our photography more rich, more entertaining, and certainly more rewarding when you actually do well. Dan, I just wanted to mention Dan was up here. Dan Browning, talk about transition from newspapers to magazine to what now? Yes, I will do that. I definitely will do that. Questions are starting to come, fast and furious here a little bit, and I'll do my best to keep up. Nathaniel, everybody's, I'm just going to say a blanket hello. How you doing, everybody? I can't thank you guys enough for taking the time. Hopefully, everybody's at their home and looking at this and maybe have a beer and some chips, or maybe some wine and cheese, or maybe a martini, to signify the end of the day. And here you are with me, and I can't thank you enough. Roger asking your opinion on giving prints to people, celebrities, PR reps to establish relationships in the business. I give prints to people. Most of them in my life now are not celebrities. They're friends. I have a long history with a lot of people I've photographed, and I give them prints. And it's part of why and how I think I've managed to maintain relationships in this business. Let me take a look here just for a second. I have to go back over to Capture One. Things progressed. I'll just kind of do a quick history here. Things progressed from my days at the Daily News were cut short by a terrible, terrible thing. I got fired. Let me be honest with you, okay? I've been fired twice in my life. From the New York Daily News and from a staff photography position at Life magazine, which was kind of a big time thing to get fired from. Let me see if I can fix my screen here a little bit. I think I'm okay. I'm going to leave well enough alone. Seth, you let me know. So the Daily News fired me, kicked me out the door. The repercussion, the financial kind of doldrums of print journalism, the faint reverberations of it were starting to occur, and you could hear the drumbeat even back then. And of course now, let's not even talk about where print journalism is in relationship to the idea of being an industry, and it's an industry under stress, to be sure. So again, getting back to Dan, the transition I made from newspapers into magazines had a stopping off point. I got this weird job as a staff photographer for ABC Television Network in New York City, which meant that I would shoot Susan Lucci on All My Children, and then I'd shoot Monday Night Football, and then I'd go into a studio and shoot a still life of an Emmy, and then I'd be sent to Washington to photograph Frank Reynolds or an anchor or somebody, And my boss looked at me. He obviously felt I had potential because he hired me. He knew I was a black and white photographer. And he said, we shoot color, we shoot Kodachrome. So, and we like things. So just, figure it out. I bought my first set of Dynalights. God almighty, Dynalights back in the day. 800 watt second pack was the standard back then. And it was basically, I always remember, it was basically $1 a watt second. An 800 watt second pack was about $800. And yeah. And I didn't even know how to plug it in, frankly, but I bought an umbrella, a stand, had a couple of heads, and I was off to the races. And it was a good thing that I was able to kind of push myself and adapt, because ABC took no prisoners. They wanted results, they wanted them fast, they wanted them in color. Like for instance, I was shooting for the news department, part of my job, Ted Kennedy at the Democratic National Convention in 1980 in New York City. Okay, Carl Lewis at the 1984 Olympics, shot for ABC. Okay, this was as a freelancer. This is part of my job. There's a good ABC picture right there. I went up in what they called God's Eye, and the crane bucket was we were maybe 150 feet over the LA Coliseum. I had to be very, very still, but I made a fisheye picture that not only included the scene, okay, but also included the ABC television camera covering that scene. That was the essence of my job. But I knew I couldn't manage that over much or stick with it particularly, forever. Let's put it that way. I did get my first taste of celebrity photography. Rodney, one light picture. You can see the umbrella, catch light, upper quarter, left in the eye. What are you gonna do? He was funny. He was gracious. It took about 5 minutes, and I got myself kind of, my first tentative toe in the water of celebrity photography via the job at ABC. But I knew I couldn't stay with ABC. I just couldn't manage to do that routine over and over again. I knew my head and my heart were with publications photography, to the point that I was shooting, I can admit this now, I was shooting surreptitiously for a new magazine called Discover Magazine. And I wasn't supposed to, because I was a full-time staff employee of ABC Television Network, and therefore my intellectual property should have been completely, absolutely dedicated to them, but I was shooting on the down low for Discover Magazine. And I made a bit of an impression with the editors there. And so they looked at me and said, want to go shoot the first launch and landing of the space shuttle? We'll put you on a freelance day rate for 3 weeks. I walked into my boss at ABC Television and I quit the next day. I gave him 2 weeks notice, but I was off to the races in a freelance career. There's the space shuttle, and I was blessed to shoot the first 3 or 4 launches and landings. But all of a sudden, I was in the world of magazines. I was shooting chrome, transparency film, Ektachrome, Kodachrome, whatever was required of the job. That's what I did. So there was a transition there. I was fired by the newspaper, hired by a television network, and then quit the television network and bounced into the realm of magazine photography. So, what are you going to do? People ask sometimes of me, they say, well, how did you plan all this out? There was no plan, right? I've made an entire career out of doing whatever seemed to be the next best thing to do. So for me, that turned out to be magazines, and it was a very rich experience. Magazines at that point were extremely powerful. They were a window on the world. And I had some heady times for magazines, I have to tell you, as I progressed through the world of magazines, in my 40s, kind of when magazines were really rocking and rolling, had budgets and this and that, there were maybe 10 or 12 magazines out there in the world that were super powerful and everybody paid attention to. And I was blessed to be shooting covers for 5 of them. And that was a really heady experience, and what an educational opportunity it was. Because the beautiful thing about being a photographer is that you oftentimes get sent to photograph somebody, something, because they're just so damn good at what they do, or the thing you're sent to is so unusual, or so beautiful, or so amazing, or someone's talent is so off the charts that they merit a story, something dedicated to that particular crescendo of talent that they represent. And that's been an amazing, amazing experience. But magazine photography changed too, right? Over time. When I started shooting for magazines, it was pretty simple stuff. I can show you, Robert Morgenthau shot for New York Magazine. Okay, it's a nice portrait, available light, Ektachrome with an 81A filter. Always remembered Ektachrome tended to, in open shade, would go a little blue. So I'd put in 81A or a cloudy, if you would call it cloudy now in digital, to warm up the inherent nature of Ektachrome, which had a tendency to be on the cool side. But this was simple stuff, man. Morgenthau was the most powerful DA perhaps in the history of New York City. And I spent several days with him, and this was a snap. I was by myself. I had no assistant, It was simpler back then in many ways, before the sort of big production aspects of celebrity and power all of a sudden swept in. Speaking of power, Joe Biden, this was shot for People magazine. God, I love to shoot for People magazine. People magazine was a black and white magazine, and it was amazing to shoot for because there were two great picture editors there, Mary Dunn and MC Martin. Loved them both. And shooting in black and white freed you up. I would be shooting color for Science magazines or Money magazine or something like that, and you'd have to bring out your lights and your Kodachrome and your power packs and all of that. It was, kind of way before the sophistication that we have nowadays with speed lights and portable lighting setups that are super sophisticated and super easy to work with and fit in your bag. So shooting black and white was an absolute treat. The idea of doing, say, for instance, there was Biden, there's underneath the streets of New York, the sandhogs, okay? The sandhogs, digging the water tunnels underneath New York. Just an amazing story. I spent 9 days underneath Van Cortlandt Park, and I developed an affinity, really, I think, for going underground and all the fascinating stuff that happens down there with miners. The sandhogs call themselves sandhogs, but effectively they're miners. They're digging these massive constructions way under the Earth's surface, and all these tunnels run under our feet, right? We're not even aware of it. We just turn the tap and want the water to come on. This is where it comes from, So, so Tanku, you're Googling transparency film? Come on, guy. You know what it is. Agfa rocked. Agfa had a warm bent to it. I never shot too much Agfa. So Nightbinder says this is a very good black and white photograph. I agree, actually. This ran as a 2-page spread and in People magazine. But, the world of magazines really, outside of People, was really the world of color. I put in Biden, so I'll put in Trump. I spent 8 days with Trump, and shot him for a cover of Newsweek, Goodness me, I'll just move along. But this was available light going over across the Queensboro Bridge, slanting sunlight slamming through the sunroof of the limo, and I'm shooting him as he rides along. Color, magazines. The holy grail for me as a magazine shooter, of course, obviously, were the big pictorial magazines, Life and National Geographic. And I had an intention, to try to shoot for both of them, but I couldn't say it was all that serious because, even when I started shooting for them, it was a little bit of a dream. It was really kind of a little bit of a dream. It was kind of one of those things like, how did I end up shooting for Life magazine? How is it possible that National Geographic asked me to come down and start shooting for them? Especially if you want another dip in the career, when they finally gave me a chance at National Geographic, one of their kind of, training grounds really for the Yellow magazine, which was, the real magazine, was to assign an incoming photographer, which I was, and I had a lot of experience shooting for New York publications, but National Geographic has its own pace, its own style, its own stable. So I was definitely an interloper. Almost some of the photographers down there might have even, regarded me as an intruder. Oh my God, he shoots for those New York publications. National Geographic had wonderful crew of photographers and had a wonderful mission, but occasionally they could get a little ponderous, you know what I mean? Like there would be this almost lugubrious kind of tonality to the meetings, like, this is for the ages. We must bring this information forth. You know, it was almost like the editor was, you know, on top of the mountain someplace carving the instructions for your contract in stone tablets and then sending you on your way to do well, you know. Anyway, I digress. But the first training ground kind of story I got, and Geographic would oftentimes assign you to what they considered a small-scale effort for the National Geographic Traveler magazine. Back in the day, Traveler was a young travel magazine trying to compete with the more established elders on the travel block, like Condé Nast Traveler and Travel and Leisure was a very powerful travel magazine back then. Travel Holiday. It was a fairly hopping little market, the travel market. So National Geographic decided to sally forth and issue their version of a travel magazine, and they sent me to shoot the Copper Canyon in Mexico. And there's a shot I made of an encampment or a log home of the Tarahumara Indians who are indigenous to that area. And I went down and I thought, well, I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right here, not too bad. What can I say? I thought I was making good effort. There's the actual train right there that goes through the canyon. I thought that was sort of a pretty picture. I was kind of, I don't know what these people want, so I'm just going to shoot everything. Well, I came back to one of the worst rounds of disapproval I've ever met as a shooter. They felt, not individually, collectively, they felt that I failed on this story by an extraordinarily wide margin. Wow, that wasn't a good moment. I thought my National Geographic career was over before it really even started. That was a dark valley for me to jump into or to realize. And once again, I had taken a lot of risk, alienated a couple of New York clients. I had a contract at that time in the late 80s for Sports Illustrated, and I basically abandoned the contract to go off and shoot for the National Geographic. And Sports Illustrated was kind of annoyed about that. They weren't happy with me. And I gave up the contract, or they took me off contract, that's probably more accurate, in 1988. They didn't invite me back to shoot until 2000. My dear friend Jimmy Colton was the editor there. So that was a long hiatus, if you will, a dry spell with Sports Illustrated. But I was like, hot to trot, man, I'm going to go shoot for the National Geographic. And that wasn't their reaction at all. Their reaction was, you failed, and we're just not sure about this. Thankfully, Geographic had a mindset back then that they would throw money at stuff. And they would also throw money at a photographer, not in terms of salary, but they would give you another chance. They would fund another opportunity. If they thought, first audition didn't go well, we'll give him another chance. I got another chance to sort of do a little bit of repair work on a story in Seattle, and I failed at that too. They let me know in no uncertain terms that, I went to Mexico, I went to Seattle, and it just wasn't happening. So what can I say? You have to be a bit of a springboard. Thankfully, photographers have very resilient spirits, and so the good thing about in the background, something I had going on was Life magazine. I was shooting for Life up in New York, and so I was like, all right, well, if the Geographic thing doesn't work out, I'll just continue to shoot for Life. But, I really, it made me wonder, maybe doubt what my ability levels were. That's the thing we oftentimes feel as photographers. I'm sure you guys feel it, and chime in if you have a feeling about this, is that almost every day out in the field you feel like you might be bumping up against the limits of your talent. can I do better on this? Some days you come back from the field and you know you kind of knocked it, but many days out there you're filled with self-doubt. And the self-doubt is fuel for the fire, to be sure. And it also, it propels you forward. That angst is a very good motivator. Insecurity, anxiety, verging on terror. Fear of failure, tremendous, kind of motivator for photographers. And so when I came back from these 2 failed efforts at the National Geographic, I was like, I don't know what else to do here. I think what was happening was that I was trying to meld the style of shooting that I had established in New York, shooting for Life, shooting for New York Magazine, setting stuff up, controlling, pre-visualizing, which is absolutely essential, or was, for a magazine like Life, but absolutely deleterious when you approach a story for the National Geographic, because they feel they gave you, at that point in time, enough time in the field to let things proceed, and then you document them as they proceed. Now, as I became a more experienced geographic photographer, I came to realize that it was a bit of an amalgam. Even with the time they gave you in the field, there were things that you had to pursue, maybe even prompt into action to be able to document them. Marco, boy, you're really cranking away here. Marco, shooting since 1989 with a Nikon F2 and a 28mm lens. Well, God bless you. 28, one of the things, I'm a Nikon shooter, one of the things that really kept me in the Nikon system, not that I ever thought, I would ever stop shooting Nikon. It was like the professional camera of record. I started shooting Nikon because if you were going to be professional, you shot Nikon. But one of the lenses that I treasured back in the day was their old style 28mm f1.4. I love a 28mm focal length, and I love the speed of that lens. I love the sharpness of it. It was in my bag all the time. As a geographic photographer shooting chrome, ISO 25, ISO 64, and then along came Kodachrome 200, which was like stratospheric ISO. But, let's just say ISO 64, that ate a lot of ISO, right? Like, I got very used to shooting a flash mix at like a 15th of a second at f2.8, because that was where Kodachrome brought me. So, wow, man, ISO today, the science of it, the extraordinary stretchability of it that has enabled us as photographers to literally have cameras that see things that we really can't. Have you ever had that experience where you come back or look at a digital file and it's picking up stuff you were not even aware of? The sensors are that good. The ISO is that good. I showed you a few pictures from the 1984 Olympics shot on Kodachrome, ISO 64, right? In 2016 in Rio, I was shooting Usain Bolt at ISO 5000. Now, put that in your pipe and smoke it, as they used to say, in terms of a significant change in our technical, it's not prowess, that would be the wrong term, because we're the ones who bring the prowess to the camera. But I guess you could refer to it as the prowess of the camera, or the capabilities of the camera. Man, these little machines, they chew right through the scenery. If we direct them properly, there's almost nothing we can't shoot now with the digital technology that is available to us. So, yeah, film forever. All right. Sorry, film forever. I love it. I'm emotionally kind of reverent about it, but on a regular basis, couldn't drag me kicking and screaming back to film. Yeah. But I do bless those beginnings. Good old Brad Matthews, who's a wonderful dance photographer out on the West Coast, keeps bringing me back and showing me on the chat room, hey, remember to say this, dipshit. Can I say that, Seth? I don't know. I just did, so I guess that's a done deal. But I do bless my beginnings as a chrome shooter, because in chrome, you had to get it right. I mean, when I would shoot Kodachrome for the National Geographic, I would shoot literally a couple hundred rolls, more. My first cover story was 1,500 rolls of Kodachrome. And all that stuff would get processed by Kodak and end up in these plastic buckets and wheeled into my editor's office in the National Geographic. And my editor down there would see every single frame I shot. None of this polishing and burnishing and cropping and saturating and this and that, and then delivering it to your editor, all sorts of pretty, okay? They saw everything you shot, every mistake, every flaw, every out of focus picture, okay? It was a rigorous endeavor, to be sure, okay? Seth just weighed in. Save the cursing for my Twitch channel. Okay, all right, sounds good. That wasn't much of a curse. I mean, oh Lord. Anyway, so let me get back over here. No, let me stay with the chat room for a second. Put my cursor back over in here. You know, a good example of kind of precision that you would have to bring, you know, to the party as a film shooter might be, I don't know, let me take a look here. I'll scroll down a little bit to a couple of film stories I shot for Geographic. Like here, this is shot on Kodachrome 200. This is the very large telescope in Chile. Let's see, Crin, the story behind the shot with the ballerina. Which one? You mean the one in the green tenement? Chime back in with me. So this is shot on Kodachrome 200 from a helicopter in Chile. I shipped 47 cases of equipment to Chile with one assistant. We loaded them up into pickup trucks, got met at the airport, 3 pickup trucks, went out into the Atacama Desert, stayed there for 2 weeks, lit those telescopes, which are the equivalent of 20-story buildings, developed radio signals that would trigger all those flashes inside, relayed a helicopter from the coast of Chile into the interior. The Atacama Desert is not an accommodating environment, and it's not friendly to helicopters because it's quite dusty. And then he hovered low for me so that I could trigger the flashes, shot it at dusk, wide-angle lens, handheld, probably pretty slow shutter speed. You can see the light in the sky is almost gone. And thank God this ended up being a 2-page spread in the National Geographic, because that was 2 weeks in the field, helicopter, 47 cases of shipping, a lot of dough went into creating this picture. And if you fail, well, your report card is not good at that point, because, you know, any magazine, Geographic or otherwise, you know, when you come back in with a take, they kind of like want to see and know what you did with their money. Okay, so yeah, so there's a good example of kind of hitting the nail on the head, or the requirement of hitting the nail on the head when we're shooting chrome. Okay, so Crin, just to get back, Crin mentioned the ballerina in the hallway, which I think is back up in this direction here. Yeah, shot this for Life. This is the Bolshoi Ballet, shot in Moscow. That tenement is the tenement of my fixer. He let me stay in his apartment, and he went off and stayed with a friend. Life told me I could go and shoot some dance, which I really love to shoot, only if I didn't spend too much money. So I did not book into a hotel. I booked in here, and I love the grittiness of the tenement so much that I used it as a location and asked one of the ballerinas from the Bolshoi to come over. And I do remember the lighting grid on this. There is a 6-foot strip light over here to camera right, extreme camera right, that is radiating somewhat harshly on this wall here. I could get rid of that, to be honest. I could retouch that out now, but I don't, because it's there. And I'm just like, that's what happened, you know? And so she's kind of doing her dance move into the light. I have a bounce up by me. I'm on the staircase over here. I shot this, actually, with a Mamiya 7, a rangefinder, 2.25 camera, manual focus, of course, on 2.25 chrome, transparency film, with a 43, I believe it was a 43 millimeter lens, which was deadly sharp. The lady back in here, I paid her money to be there, and she just continuously sweeping the floor. And up in here is a Norman 200B with a full cut of tungsten gel clamped up in here to the ceiling. And that's the whole lighting rig on that, if anybody is curious. All right, let me get back to a few questions here. Let's see. All right, love the interface on Nikon. Yes, I do as well. Can you identify that feeling when you start shooting and there is one shot when you just now know that's the one, only one, felt that day was worth it even before seeing the image afterward? Yes, I can, because there's something that triggers inside of you. Now, everybody's different, but for me, I know when I got what I come for, I pretty much know it in my gut, in my head, in my heart, out in the field. Yeah, it may be different, as I say, for some people, but if I have to drag a take back to the studio and pour through it, hoping something cool happened, I know I'm in trouble. You know, right? You know when you screw up, and you know when you do well. You know, your eyes sort of, they're alive. You know, there's a, I don't know, a radiant effect a good photograph has on your soul, because when you pop up that LCD and you know you've got it, it's like, yeah, it's like the sun shining on your heart. You know, not to be overly dramatic about it. Or I could put it in the words of my high school basketball coach, who once looked at me and said, the sun doesn't shine on a dog's rear end every day of the week, McNally, but right now it's shining on yours. And that's still kind of the way I feel when I make a good photograph. Oh, Lord. Seth, you obviously shouldn't have done this. You let me in front of a microphone, and a bunch of wonderful folks are listening to me, and oh my God, it's just, you know. Hey, Joe, what are some of your favorite Olympic moments as a photographer? I can't remember if I put any more Olympic stuff in here or not. Let me do this, come over here and scroll a little bit. Scroll. See if there's anything here from the Olympiad. I've done 4 Olympics. It's really, really weird. I've done 4 Olympics, and they've all been spaced apart. I did, my bad. I've done 3 Olympics. I was supposed to do my 4th this summer. Not going to happen. But every one of the Olympics I've shot so far has been 16 years apart. 1984, 2000, 2016. I don't know. Coincidence? I don't think so. Anyway, I don't really have another Olympiad image in here that is really worth talking about. Because the early ones I shot in the 1984 games, I'll be straight up with you, I didn't do that well. Time magazine had me on assignment for the Sydney Olympics, the Millennial Games. I didn't do well there either. I'll be straight up with you. Time magazine and my editor there in particular was not pleased. And I can understand why. Because I looked at my take after that games and I thought, like, I really didn't get my arms around this particularly well. I worked hard. I had a couple of covers. I had a cover of Time Asia. I did a couple things well. But, the hard part about shooting at Olympics back in the magazine world, and if you're not in that world, you don't think about this, is it's a 4-year cycle, right? And it coincides with the American election cycle, right? 2020, going to elect a new president, going to have an Olympics. Same thing back in 16, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're shooting for a magazine like Time, you have to realize getting involved, going down to the Olympics, you already know that the editors couldn't give a hoot about the Olympics. Happening in Australia? Yeah, talk to me about it. They are vectored in on the American political scene. That's the nature of Time magazine. It's a word magazine, or was anyway. And so you knew as a photographer going in, there was a high likelihood that you could work your tail off and they would publish absolutely nothing. Okay, and you accepted that right away. You accepted the fact that when you would go on a cover assignment for a magazine like Newsweek or Time, there were 4 other covers being shot simultaneously. So you only had a 20-30% chance of having your picture on the cover of the magazine. Didn't always work like that, but in the news game, there's a lot of backstopping going on because you just don't know if something's going to work out, right? Editors, that's the crucial difference in many ways between a good editor and a good photographer. Good photographer vectors in on the story, right? Very passionate about the story, very concerned about the moment at hand. A good editor understands that photographer and that writer out in the field and that story and how important it is, but they have larger concerns because they're concerned not about the look of that particular story, but about the look and the feel of the entire magazine. So they have to be very dispassionate when you bring in your breathless, images. Oh my God. Oh, I almost died. I sweated blood. There were tears. They don't care. Understand, as a publications photographer, the editor does not care what you went through to get that photograph. They just care if the photograph in front of them works. And that's the right attitude to have. Sorry to say, or not sorry, but, don't get overwrought about this. If you just absolutely passionately clung to every one of your images that you submitted to a magazine and felt like it was, just the be-all and end-all of your photographic career to get that stuff published, man, you would have, found yourself on a shrink's couch, almost immediately. Though there are some photographers, though, who, feel that the magazine is subservient to them and their needs, their wishes. Those photographers, and the writers too. I actually worked with a writer at Time magazine on a cover story down at Disney, and he actually said in mixed company amongst Disney officials, he said this, and he actually believed it. I'll never forget. He goes, "Joe's pictures are the whores that sell the chalice of my words." So in other words, I was shooting the half-naked ladies outside in the storefront, beckoning the reader into the quiet tabernacle of his verbiage. What a jerk. Anyway, moving along. Oh wow, I got behind here. I'm sorry. Behind the story behind Image 130, it looks like a still from a Spielberg movie. This. Oh, okay. Yeah, this was shot for Nikon. This is my imagination at work, a little bit. It was a mix of assignments, really. PPE, the big photo convention at the Javits Center, was being held on Halloween weekend, and they wanted spooky pictures to drop from the rafters. And big, 30 feet by 50 feet kind of banners. And so I came up with this idea that I work with a brilliant Russian lady, Anastasia. She's an amazingly talented body painter and just a magician of a makeup person. And so I thought if we could take like an evil elf and paint her into the wall, so this unsuspecting little girl who's should be going to sleep, but instead is reading a scary story at night, having no idea that this elf is magically appearing and does not have good intentions for her. And that's kind of the way my brain works. And they said, okay, go for it and let us, tell us how it works out. And this did work out pretty well. It was dropped as a banner from the rafters of Javits, and people seemed to enjoy it. And it was a big production. It was a pre-light day and then a shoot day. There's probably about a dozen flashes in this, all lighting various bits and pieces of the puzzle. But the production work on this is extensive because we had to rent this room in a house and then move a set painter, a scene painter in here. And she worked for a week painting this mural that I then had Anastasia paint the model into. And this is just all production credit goes to Lynn Del Mastro here at our studio for arranging all this. Lynn is a magnificent producer. So let me go back to the old chat room here, and let's see. Seth Miranda, remember you asked if I had someone who does crazy hair like you could hire for this? Yeah, absolutely. Do you still have an image in your head that you still need to capture? That shot you would love to do, but still not round to organizing? Yeah. I got a bunch of, there's like squirrels in my head, that are pictures that I want to do, and they're racing around in there, and they're like, oh, come on, and it's a question of timing, patience, and, the notion that I can find a vehicle, which also means find the funding to do a story that's in my head, in my imagination. If I go back over here, I might have this here in a story. I did a story for the National Geographic on human performance. It was in honor of the 2000 Olympics for National Geographic. They couldn't obviously cover the games, so they walked up to it by doing this story. The whole idea of the story was the limits of the human body. How fast, how far, how high. Okay, so they assigned me to do this, and it was a pretty good choice to do it, actually. And had a great time doing the story. Had a great time. But I told my editor, I said, look, again, Geographic had a flexibility in terms of budget. And I said, one of the highest expressions, I think, passionately, of human performance doesn't occur on the ball field. It does, but it occurs elsewhere as well, namely on the stage. Dancers. Dancers are some of the most highly evolved human performers I can even think about. So I took some of my budget, and without really knowledge or permission from the magazine, I paid a fee to the Palobolas dance troupe, which you see up here, and had them create one of their human tableaus for me. Because as a photographer, you have to be involved, you have to be passionate, and the stories that you do have to somehow service your soul, and there's like a backwash there. It's like the waves lap up on the beach, recede, and then come back again. So there's this meshing of the personality, psyche, emotionality of the photographer with the bare bones structure of the story and what has to be accomplished. I always cite Bill Allard, a historically important photographer who shot for many years for the National Geographic. Bill's, one of the things that he says is, if you are indifferent, you cannot do exceptional work. And that's a truism. If you don't care, you're going to produce pictures that when people look at them, they're not going to care either. If you don't really care, if you don't put heart and soul into this, then it's really ballsy of you to ask a reader out there to spend time with what you just did, right? It's just not fair. So you have to be all in. You have to be off the cliff. You have to be out there in space and have emotional risk associated with your efforts if you are going to be a good photographer and produce fruitful work. Because, let's face it, when somebody gets in front of your camera, that's a risk they take. It's a gift they give to you. You have to conversely or concurrently have emotional risk invested in the story, in that picture, in that portrait that you're about to do. You have to be in there with your subject, heart and soul, encouraging them, being confident, bringing them along, and being the good shepherd of their image as it translates through your lens. Because that's where you really earn your stripes as a photographer. You have to care very deeply. And when you fail, the pain is serious. Let's put it that way. And you will always fail. Welcome to my world. Constant, non-stop pain, angst, anguish, but, like they used to say in ABC television, Wide World of Sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Well, there's a photographer's life right there, all right, so after explaining all the lighting equipment needed for the ballerina photo, do you prefer studio lighting on location than speed lights? Good question, Nightbinder. I prefer anything that works. And I'm not being facile or off the cuff here. I am just telling you I am a chameleon. I adapt to the needs of the story. If I got to bring 47 cases to Chile, I'll do it. If I got to wander the streets in nice light with a single camera and a single lens, and that services the story, I'll do it. If speed lights and being light, fast, and mobile are the ticket to a good photograph, I'll punch that ticket. If I gotta laboriously collect and construct a scene and light this and light that and be like a field general out there on the megaphone, okay, move here, do this, I'll do that too. I'm very comfortable behind the camera as needs present. And that comes from having done this a long time. I will say this, when I have a camera in my hands and I'm tuned in, I'm pretty confident. I'm a pretty confident person. So, when shooting sports, do you use back button focus? Yes, I do. It is definitely the professional way to go. Okay, back button single point dynamic, or maybe a small group, because depending on the needs of your subject at hand. Now, is that always true? No. I was shooting the 2016 Olympics for Sports Illustrated, and my job for Usain Bolt's 100-meter gold medal run, it was split up, I think, among 6, 7, 8 photographers. My job was the start. Okay? All right, sounds easy enough. They've just got your lens on there, and they come out of the gate, and you go click. Nah. Usain Bolt is bigger, much bigger than your average sprinter. He also started slow because I had observed him in the heats and tried to shoot him in the heats because I knew that I was responsible for the start picture, which would kick off the efforts of, 7 or 8 other photographers. So I felt the pressure. And so I knew, looking at the angle, kind of 45 degrees, 400 millimeter lens, and I'm down in kind of a low grandstand area looking at the array of runners. There were maybe, 10, 8 to 10. And Usain had the prime lane right in the middle. So I knew the other runners would break faster than he would. And the autofocus would grab them and not him. So I went to manual focus, and I watched him back and forth as he warmed up, and then I saw him step on the area that his first foot would have to step, breaking from his blocks. And I focused on that, took some gaffer tape, locked that puppy down, didn't touch the focus, and when they broke, I was on high speed on my drive, whatever it is, I was shooting D5s, so maybe looking at 8 to 10 frames a second, bango, had my start picture manual focus. So some of these things, you can't just, let the camera tech do the job for you and assume, oh, I got autofocus, I got auto exposure, I got auto this, I got auto that. You have to think your way into the picture, you have to plan, you have to scout, you have to identify problems before they occur and try to solve them in your head before you ever put that camera to your eye. So, all right, so anyway, here, let me come back over. I'll get the parabolas, folks, a little bit off the screen here. And you talk about New York. Here's typical National Geographic, what they send you to do. The power of light, I'll just kind of divert here for a second. Power of light, this is in Russia. I was sent way north in Siberia. Well, actually not Siberia. I was sent north to the Kola Peninsula. And about 600 clicks north and east of Murmansk, Lake Lavazero. And these little Russian kids in February never saw the sun, so they're exposed to UV light. And that was a picture that ran as a 2-page spread in the Geographic. I always loved the picture. Kind of, to me, it's very weird and, these little googly-eyed kids. But then, back home, power of light. Okay, you have to think your way into the story. What's something everybody's done, pretty much? Change a light bulb. Okay, story on light. Everybody can relate to changing a light bulb. So how do I make a light bulb changing exciting or interesting? Well, change one of the most famous light bulbs in the world. The one at the top of the Empire State Building. And I don't know if I went back down in here, Adorama's someplace down in here. Seth probably lives someplace out in here. But anyway, so all right, so let me go back here. Let's see. Joe, what's the story behind the firefighter, please? I'm assuming this firefighter. I don't think I have any others in here. That's my friend Louis Caccioli. I photographed Louis in a project called The Faces of Ground Zero after 9/11. And it was an homage, a tribute, a collection of extraordinary human beings. It was an effort to raise some money and hopefully enable folks to tell their story and find a measure of emotional solace and comfort in those days after 9/11. Let's see. Where are we here? Norman, damn, okay, there we go. How many photos did you submit for review for Chile? I submitted everything because I was shooting Kodachrome and it got processed and shipped to the National Geographic. Thankfully, I was able to bring my film from Chile back with me physically. Here's an anxiety-producing thing, which is why I don't get kind of wired up too much about digital and losing it. And I mean, we're safe with our digital. We back it up on hard drives, multiple hard drives, all that sort of stuff. But if you want anxiety about the preservation of your images, go shoot for the National Geographic Kodachrome and shoot in India for 3 weeks and take some 300 rolls of Kodachrome for which there are no backups and put them in a Federal Express box and ship them from Mumbai to Washington, D.C., and then wait 3 days to hear if it got there. Ha-ha! Now, if you want to not sleep at night as a photographer in the field, try that one on for size. Oh, man. Thoughts on another Flash Bus tour? Not going to happen! Okay? That was a time and a place in photography. Happy we did it. Had fun doing it. Met a lot of wonderful people. Had some great photographic discussions and relationships that have come from it. But the bus will not roll again. So somebody's saying here, B-2 bomber and F-22. Whoa. Where do you see that, dude? Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're right there, Joe. You shot those pictures. Yeah. Okay. The B-2 in flight. Here's how things spin. Okay. I'll tell you a small story. My pilot, I was in a backseat in a T-38. T-38 is a training plane, but it's supersonic. It's super powerful. It's a wonderful plane to fly in. And my pilot, his call sign was Tex. He was kind of laconic, you would say. He was kind of guy, if the plane's on fire and you have to eject and you're spinning cartwheels towards the ground and certain death, his heart rate would probably go to about 60, because he kind of talked like this. Great guy. But he didn't get wired up about much. And so for him, this mission was boring. The B-2 is making racetracks, what they call racetracks, around Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. And that's a home base for a lot of the B-2s, maybe even all of them. And I got a chance to fly and shoot the B-2, which is still, to this day, an incredibly graphic kind of thing to see, either on the ground or in the air. So the T-38, here's the thing. I've flown in F-16s, F-A-18s, and T-38s. They all have their different configurations. In a F-16, you can bring 2 cameras because it's a right-hand stick. And so when you're photographing, you can have 2 cameras and then switch them out and squeeze the spare camera between your knees when you go upside down or aerodynamic. You cannot do that in an FA-18. Small point of information. Because it's a center stick. And the center stick in the rear seat is dynamic because the pilot up front is working it. And so that thing is banging around against your kneecaps. So you can't put anything down there. So you can only use 1 camera. T-38, I looked at the cockpit configuration, and there was this metal box to my right-hand side. It was a sleeve that just fit what I believe at this point would have been an 80 to 200 millimeter zoom. I had never flown a long lens in a tactical aircraft before, and I thought, well, what the hell? So I put my 80 to 200, because we weren't going to go upside down. We weren't going to pull G's. We were just going to sedately kind of follow this guy. And so here's what, the, remaining synapses that I've got in my, brain here. I'm looking at the B2 in profile, and I all of a sudden thought, wow, that's really cool looking. Even the gray, cloudy sky made it seem more sinister. I reached for my long lens, shot it. This was the first all-digital story in the history of the National Geographic. It was closing in Washington very rapidly. That night I went to the hotel. It was probably my first transmission experience. I sent my editor a JPEG on dial-up, internet. And he got the JPEG, dropped it into the layout, and the magazine approved it. And by that time I had gotten back, was able to get him the raw files. They closed the story within like 48 hours of that, and this was the lead. It was physically the last picture I made in the whole story. What, if any, were your longest burnout periods, and what did you do to get back on the horse? I've had some pretty serious burnout periods, yeah. I've had times in my career where I felt like I couldn't buy a photograph. My eyes didn't see, my energy level was low, my motivation to shoot pictures was nearly gone, I have found in those times that you have to shoot your way through it. This is my own personal formula. It doesn't really apply to anybody else. But take it for what you will. I double down. I work harder. I just push and push and push. And the funny thing, amazing thing about photography is you can walk around the corner and see a kid playing soccer, bouncing the ball against the wall in beautiful light, and make a few snaps, and that becomes the wind in your sails again. A simple photograph, something where you just thought, oh my God, I just succeeded. And it's like some, flash lord or something breathed air back into your lungs. And then you're able to just look around and realize, okay, I can start climbing this hill again. So I just there's nothing genius about it. I don't go away. I don't go to a spa. I don't meditate. I don't, start, infusing my food with some sort of herbal remedy. I just work harder because that's kind of what I do. All right. Yeah. All right. The best thing in photography is the story. I always have story before having a shot. Yeah. That's who we are. I mean, we're photographers. We call ourselves photographers, but at the end of the day, we're storytellers. Just like those cave people back in the walls in France, and the cave paintings and murals. What do you think they were doing? They were telling their story, and that was their version of a D5, those cave walls, and what they left behind. What do you leave behind? When you pass, your memory passes. It's like, flip the switch. Everything goes dark, man. So one of the best things you can leave behind is some sort of legacy or some sort of history. And one of the best ways to create that history is pictorially. Pictures that reverberate, pictures that resonate. There's a lot of photographers out there, I think, who maybe ascribe maybe a little too much, a little too grandiose in certain assessments. So let's talk about that for a second. The power of pictures. We all know about the power of pictures, right? I could describe a picture here, and you know it in your head. Flag raising, Iwo Jima. Okay? All right? Nurse getting kissed by a sailor, Times Square. Little girl running down the road in Vietnam, horribly burned. I don't have to, send you a file. You're seeing those pictures in your head right now. Those are iconic pictures. And there's some folks who might use that term, I think, a little too loosely, like, this is probably the most iconic picture I've ever shot. Well, dude, let's talk about it. I had a retrospective, a show of my work at the Monroe Gallery in Santa Fe, which is a wonderful gallery. Sid and Michelle are amazing people and have such thorough, amazing respect for historically important photojournalism. And they gave me a one-man show. Oh my God, it was a few years ago. 50 pictures on the wall. My entire career boiled down to 50 pictures on a wall. And it was reviewed by, I think it was a little booklet. I can't remember exactly. It might have been Art in America, or it was, the Monroes assured me it was a powerful art publication, and the fact that they were reviewing my show was a good thing. And the reviewer was very intelligent. He gave me a good review, which I was very happy about. And he said right there, he goes, these pictures are memorable, but not iconic. And I thought, well, damn, he's right. I've shot some memorable pictures over time, pictures that people have walked up to me at workshops or something and said, I remember, etc. That's really rewarding and very cool. But iconic, that's a mountain I have yet to climb. Okay, has Nat Geo or other magazines reached out to you for your vision on the current pandemic? No. I don't have a relationship with the National Geographic anymore. They have moved on. I have moved on. All good. I have been asked to participate in a couple of projects, which I've honestly have had to turn down because here in our house, I'll just leave it at this, we're being very cautious. And so I'm kind of staying, Annie and I are staying to ourselves. Let's put it that way. Valerian, hi from Romania. Romania, one of my favorite places, just amazing. Has there been a photo that an editor loved and you just can't figure out why they like it? There's been takes I've submitted that I cringed and thought were barely breathing, and the magazines have really liked them. That's a wonderful day, because then it's like, oh God, they actually liked it. And there have been some picture editors who have, and this is the beauty and benefit of a really terrific picture editor. Jimmy Colton comes to mind. Bill Douthit, who used to work at the National Geographic. Mel Scott at Life magazine. Mel took the job of picture editing really seriously because he always used to explain to me, he said, look, Joe, if I miss a picture, then I'm taking money out of that photographer's pocket, because if I miss a picture that could have run in the magazine or even been a 2-page spread that we would have paid him more money for, I'm hurting him not only artistically but also financially. So I take that responsibility very seriously. And I'm really blessed to have worked with any number of picture editors throughout time that have really done amazing work and been that benevolent place, been a defense mechanism, been a shelter from the storm for the photographer. And that's a wonderful thing for a picture editor to be. And I have had the blessings of having certain photo editors when I'm kind of feeling down, like, oh, it all sucks, man, I didn't do well. And they pick out a picture and say, dude, you've got it right here. Mel did that for me once. He pointed out a picture when I was like, I think I have to go back. I'm just not sure. And he looked at me and he goes, look at this. The story is right in this picture. You've got this, 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 and this. And it was on my first story for Life magazine. And I had turned in my film. It was on the art scene on the Lower East Side. And I think I even have a picture here from that. Yeah, there it is. David Wojnarowicz, very well-known counterculture artist, did a lot of powerful work, died way too young of AIDS, and David was, I guess in the art world you might have called him an enfant terrible, unruly, pushed boundaries, all that stuff. And so his work was kind of tribal at the time and kind of a little bit street oriented. So we went out into the street and I set this fire on the Lower East Side. I actually stole a New York City garbage can. I had a minivan at the time. That was our crew van. And so we took the seats out of the middle of it. And I literally looked around. We drove up next to what looked like a nice looking garbage can on the streets of New York. I believe it was West Broadway. We looked around. Nobody seemed to be watching us. We took that garbage can right off the sidewalk, put it in my van, and drove off. Yeah, it was a long time ago. And that's what is on fire there. I let the local fire department, I forget which house is down there, and they were like, yeah, we'll drive by every once in a while. And, you know, I said, look, I need to do this. And they were like, yeah. You know, it was a little bit looser back then, let me put it that way. And so we built this fire. David wanted to paint his face blue. I said, that's cool. He wanted me to get a fake Uzi submachine gun. I got him that. He had the bones and his skulls and everything out there. And we shot this. The lighting is not the fire, by the way. It's like 3 Norman 200Bs stashed down by the fire. I lost one of them that night. It frickin' melted, man. But I got this shot. He fades a little up at the top. That's a flaw, you know. But there's enough guts there in the transparency that I can pull him out and his facial expression still reads. So, yeah, what are you going to do? You know, you do what you do. If you have to steal a garbage can, you steal a garbage can. Nowadays, you know, I wouldn't steal a garbage can because you'd have to apply for a permit. And if you got caught stealing a New York City property, I might end up in serious trouble. So nowadays I'd go to a Home Depot and I'd buy a garbage can. So yeah, a little more formal nowadays. And let's see, I was late to the party, but have yet to watch it. Last night's stream with Daniel and Seth was the best thing ever. I don't doubt it. Seth and Daniel are pretty cool dudes, and they rock and roll. They know their stuff and they rock and roll. All right. Let's see. Seth, are you still there? You better be still there, man. Seth, don't desert me now in my hour of need. So we are at 7:35. We were supposed to go to 7:30, and I'm, you know, pretty chatty here, I guess, you know, you would say. Trying to squeeze in questions and folks, and everybody seems to say hello and have a couple, you know, notes of encouragement, or, you know, have a remembrance of a photograph or a time we might have met in the field. And wow, cool, Patty, when is the next installment of the Ballerina in the Laundromat series? Yes, I have a specially, you know, kind of dastardly idea of the end of the demise of my next ballerina. But I can't share it because it has to be a surprise. And we're certainly not going to do it anytime like right away because, you know, we are where we are right now. And but as soon as we get a little bit of room to maneuver, you know, whenever it is safe, you know, I think we'll go back out in the field. I don't think travel is going to come back right away. So it would be perfect to go and do a couple more installments on that series and stay local, you know, be safe, stay local, all that sort of stuff, you know. Okay, whenever you're ready to dismount, it's up to you, Joe. All right, okay. Hey, Joe, my Uncle Wallace worked on the Bryant Denny Saturday book. Yes, he did. Yes, he did, for sure. That was a good book. That was fun to work on. The Bryant Denny Stadium is down at the University of Alabama, for folks who might not be college football fans. I am not a college football fan so much. I mean, I like it. I don't follow anything, you know, in particular. There's too many games and too many, you know, I've never been, you know, one of the folks who, you know, goes tailgating and goes to the stadium. But it's fun. A lot of people get excited about it, and certainly the people in Alabama get excited about it because football down there is like a religion, a passion. And so we went down with a crew of really talented photographers. Ben Van Hook, wonderful photographer. Joel Sartori, you know, National Geographic shooter, was down there. Rick Rickman, quintessential sports shooter. We formed a core down there, a group of photographers that Art Maripol was on that, I believe. Wonderful shooter, had a long career with Southern Living. And yeah, we did well. We knocked out a book in a day, but then moved on, Bryant Denny Saturday. Boy, I haven't thought about that in a long time. Where can we see your shots? Got a Facebook or an Instagram? Boy, I'm glad you asked, Dominic. Yes, I'm on Instagram. Joe McNally Photo on Instagram. We have a Joe McNally page on Facebook. We are on Twitter. All of the above. My wife Annie Cahill is. She's gonna not be happy with me right now, but she's just so good at social media, organizing for us at the studio. She's a genius at it. That's where. Oh boy. No, we're in it together. We have a great team at the studio. Annie handles the social media front, which is wonderful. She's super at it. I handle kind of the blue sky sort of stuff. I go out and shoot the pictures. Lynn does the production work. We did have Callie for 10 years. He was our crew chief. He just left, fell in love, and moved to Virginia. Go figure, So, anyway, years ago, you put together a tribute for 9/11 first responders. Will you do the same for COVID? Focus on medical pros. I don't think so. There are people out there already working on that, doing a magnificent job. So that's probably not my purview at this point in time, though I'm glad you brought it up. And I will just close the chat here by saying to all the folks everywhere on the medical front who are putting themselves at risk and potentially their families at risk to help us to get us back to health, to prevent illness, to save lives. And the first responders, the medical personnel, the magnificent efforts that they are making on our behalf, my head, my hands, my heart go out to you. You're amazing people, and keep doing what you're doing because we are all depending on you. And it's just an amazing example of humanity, grace under pressure, dignity, and a willingness to help out other people. It's the best of us we're seeing right now. The best of us. So, anyway, I'm going to sign off, folks, because dinner calls, right? We've actually gone over time. So, 7:40. Seth, last thing, am I coming to do the photo show in September in the UK? Highly doubtful. We'll be in the UK in the fall, a little bit later. How many more collaborations with Daniel Norton? As many as he'll allow me, as many as Daniel will put up with me for. All right, Seth Miranda, you mad genius. Thank you very much. Thanks for coaching me through to this program. Thanks everybody who stopped by. Thanks for the questions. Thank you for your pictures, and stay in the course. Be good, be well, stay behind the camera, get back out there in the world and start documenting again when all is safe. All right, I'm going to hit stop streaming. If I can figure that out, Seth. Oh, man. Don't ask me to do something technical. Here we go. Going to move the screen over. Stop streaming. There it is. I see the button. Hitting it now. Stay well, everybody.